Well, I'm not proud of myself, but it's time to announce what happened a few months ago, and that is that I did relapse. If you look at the very earliest videos on this channel, you'll see that I was trying to get off my drug that I was using. And I did, actually, for the first time in my life, successfully get off of it. But it was a huge struggle, and it took months for me to feel okay. But ultimately, it only lasted maybe a year, not even a year, before I started casually using again. And that casual use was a slippery slope. I thought that being a psychology major and having read all the research saying that the most recent way of treating addictions is to teach how to use it in moderation, I thought that I could handle that. But now I know that I can't. And all of the pain and the withdrawal symptoms that I went through 2.5 years ago when I first kicked the habit were, all in vain, because now I'm right back at it. What happened was back in 2014, I think it was October, I weaned myself off, and then I was able to keep at that. I don't think that I used at all for, I don't even remember. I remember the following summer, I think, was when I had my first taste of it again. Um, but I remember being able to tell at that time, I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to do this. Like, yeah, I had this taste and I can move on now, but if I keep having this taste, like, I'm I'm gonna go right back to where I was, and I'm gonna lose all the positive things that have occurred, that have changed since I stopped using. This is a drug that I've used all my life, even before I was born, and I didn't realize that until I tried to quit. And I talked to my mom and realized that she was using while she was pregnant with me. She tried to stop, but that only lasted like a week. She couldn't deal with the withdrawals, and I was born addicted to it. And I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't use. But what I do remember is up until a few years ago, it was always use in moderation. I remember there was a time in high school where I sort of used a lot relative to, I guess, what normal people do, but it's not like I do now. Less than that. But my grandparents at the time had told me, that this is, you got to stop this. Well, now I remember I went through high school and college, and I remember back in college, yeah, I used it, but not all that much. At first, it was just I didn't use it that much, and then through the second half of college, it was partially that I couldn't afford to, and partially it was hard to get. But it still being that I I probably used every day, just about every day, but maybe just a small amount. And I don't remember it like consuming my life. And that went up through 2012 when I graduated college. And sometime between 2012 and 2014 is when it started. And I think it was during that time, really from 2012 to 2013, when I worked at Hollister and Abercrombie and Fitch. That's when people really started to notice it and started to express their concerns to me, because I was afraid of losing that high while I was at work. I was, for the first time, steadily working a full time job. It was my first post college full time job. And I, worked 10, 12-hour shifts. And I was afraid of the effects of withdrawal, I guess. Being tired and, you know, anxious and uh, all those uncomfortable things. I was afraid of that. And the drug also helped me get through the long shifts, gave me something to look forward to as like a treat during the shift. Excuse me. It just, it started maybe becoming a problem then in 2013. And at that time it was kind of like, yeah, I know. I know this isn't good for me and I need to stop. But uh it wasn't the right time to stop. And that does sound like an excuse, but I think for somebody who has been through this, and I think any of you out there who have been through this would understand that you have to be in the right mindset to get yourself off of something. You can't just have somebody say to you, this is bad for you, and you just stop because of that. It doesn't work like that. You have to be in a place in your life, and you have to be in the correct mindset and be able to say, okay, this is the time that I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. And that's what it took to get me off of this in the first place back in 2014. So 2013, 2014, people were worried about me. 2014, my new employer, they started mentioning it, mentioning how much I used at work. It didn't affect my job performance. In fact, if it was probably more positive effect than anything. But they were concerned with my health. They saw the amount I used every day, and they said that it couldn't be good for me. Couldn't be good for my heart or really any part of my body. And I don't know, maybe I used it as a coping mechanism. Maybe I wasn't as tired as I thought. Maybe I used it as a, you know, in my video, How I Got Fat, I used food as a coping mechanism for depression and some things going on in my life. And maybe I used this prior to using food. Maybe I used this as a way of coping. But whatever it was, my usage increased and increased. Now, thankfully, back in 2014, I had moved to a college town, and it was just in an atmosphere of bettering oneself. And I not only learned to eat better, and I exercised and got out a lot more, and I started training for that half marathon, but I also decided that I was going to kick this habit. And by God, I did. And I kept off of it for 6 to 9 months, something like that. And I started using again accidentally. I started using something that I didn't realize had the drug in it, and when I was finally told, it I was so surprised. I was surprised that I was surprised that it was in there. But then I was like, well, no wonder I crave this stuff. No wonder I can't stop drinking it. And it was, I think that was the start of the slippery slope. And I remember even a year ago, back in 2016, I would go to Chipotle and I'd be like, okay, now this is your one. This is, you can do this because you're at Chipotle. then over time, that one became several times a week. That one became um, whenever I stopped at a gas station. And it just kept going from there and there. To the point where it was like, okay, I'm not going to keep it in the house. And that'll control my consumption. I'm going to have to drive to the gas station to get it. I'm going to have to whatever. But in the end, I think I finally found a version that not only had a large quantity of the drug in it, but it was the last straw and it was my downfall. And I gotta say, I'm using right now. This is my kryptonite with the 60 milligrams per bottle, 68 milligrams of caffeine. Now, I know caffeine is not that important of a drug, and I know that I could have much worse vices, but it is my only addiction, and it is bad for you, especially in the quantities that I drink. 400 milligrams is lethal. This is 68 milligrams. So, I'm not chugging these down, but maybe I'll have 2 in a day, 3 in a day. I'm getting like half the lethal dose right there. That's not even counting if I eat out and I get a diet or something. And this is no one's fault but my own. And it's something I'm really struggling with. I hate that I went so far and I felt so good when I was off of it, and then I slowly let myself get back into it. I hate that the research was wrong in my case and I can't use responsibly. And I hate that I know that if I ever decide to quit again, that I'm going to have to completely be off of it forever because I have seen that I can't use responsibly. I really do feel like, just like any other addict, that it is something that I'm going to have to struggle with the rest of my life. Like I said, especially being born with this addiction because of my mom using when she was pregnant with me, and I don't ever remember a time where I wasn't using, and I mean, so I definitely did all throughout my childhood. I think the only way that I could possibly avoid it is to find out what I'm coping with. What is it that whatever has happened the last 2 or 3 or 4 years that has pushed me to use more than a moderate amount, and resolve that situation. So this is my struggle, and I am not in the right frame of mind right now. I've got some other issues that I've got to figure out before I can get off this stuff. But when I do, I will make a series of videos about it, as I did before, which were the very first videos that were on this channel, of me getting off of caffeine, my experience, and what it was like afterward. Because now I clearly remember how good it was. And if somebody's never stopped caffeine, you can't imagine how good you feel when you're off of it. So someday, hopefully someday soon, I will be able to say again that I am off of this. So guys, thanks for hearing my story. If you have any addiction stories of your own, or stories of relapse, whether it be sugar, caffeine, or heroin, I'd like to hear them down below. Because the mechanism of addiction works the same way with all of them. Again, like this video, hit subscribe, and I will have a new financial video for you guys coming next Sunday.